Hey, Steve Mignani here doing the Junkyard Crawl at Berniston Auto Wrecking in Bernardston, Massachusetts with, well, a once very modern Ford truck. This is a 1933 Ford model BB 1-ton 6-wheeler. Now today we have the era of the EcoBoost, the Power Stroke, 1,000 foot-pounds of torque, trucks that have as much power as over-the-road big rigs had in the 1950s in a 1-ton or a 3/4-ton pickup. Well, in 1932, Ford really added something special to the medium truck world, and that's the V8. This one is a 1933. I'm pretty sure it's not a 32, but with that said, minus the grille, kind of hard to tell. But something this does have that wasn't available in 1931 is the Flathead V8. Now the beauty of the Flathead, this is 229 cubic inches, 75 horsepower, and 114 foot-pounds of torque versus the 50 horsepower and 90 foot-pounds of the 200-inch four-banger that would have been the only engine available in 1931 back. And keep in mind, the first Ford trucks, actual Ford-produced trucks at the factory in 1917, there were evolutions of the Model T. They were called the TT. They were a 1-ton Model T. And in when the Model A replaced it in 1927, the AA was the Model A-based 1-ton truck. And of course, 1932, the B series trucks or cars got the BB series trucks. So you basically take the model, double it, and that's what you get as the name for the Ford truck, the 1-tonner. This is a BB series. Now the thing is, a 1932 Flathead would have a single barrel carburetor, or one barrel. So either this is a 32 with a swapped in later motor, or it's a 1933 with the new for 33 two-barrel carburetor. But the amazing thing about the Flathead is it is a V8, but it does not have rocker covers or push rods or rocker arms. That's because you pull this cylinder head off. These studs, I think 21 studs, take that off, lift the head. You'll see the cylinders and the intake and exhaust valves above the cylinder in the face of the deck. That's because the exhaust ports are actually in the block and the intake ports are in the top and they come out to this manifold. And one of the things about these tend to run pretty hot because the exhaust gases go through the block, not through an external manifold. So Ford designed these with two water pumps, one on each side of the engine. So you can see right there, two pumps on the early Flatheads. And again, that was to assure circulation in that really hot spotted block where the exhaust gases go through the inside of the block down low. Now the magneto, or I should say the distributor on these things, early ones, was driven right off the front of the cam, and it actually sits right here. There's going to be 4 wires going through each of these conduits to each bank, 1 and 1. Later years, the Flathead, the distributor would come off at an angle, kind of like a big block Chrysler, but early ones were right there is what you get. And I think 1932, they also had aluminum intakes, whereas 33, they went to this iron 2-barrel piece. And again, this is a 75 horsepower and 114 foot-pounds of torque. And one thing that's unique about V8 equipped Ford trucks is the hood went from 20 to 23 louvers right here, and that was for extra cooling, the extra area for the heat to come out. And also that little ghost right there, would be a V, would go right here. So this is a V8 hood for sure. And again, 1932, the first year for a V8 in a Ford truck. And believe it or not, first year for a V8 in any Ford passenger car. In fact, John Dillinger, I believe, was one of the outlaws who loved these things, Ford passenger cars with the V8, because it was so fast they could run away from the cops. And he once wrote Henry Ford, John Dillinger did, a note saying, hey, thank you, Henry Ford, for making the world's best affordable getaway car. But again, this is the 1-ton truck, so the 75 horsepower from this Flathead is going to be dulled quite a bit versus a 1,400-pound Model B Roadster or something like that. But again, as a truck, this has pressed steel wheels, 5 lugs. We see them here, big drum brake inside of there. The Ford stainless steel hubcap, if that's literally a hubcap right there, covers the hub, still present. Split rims, yeah, these are, if you don't rig these just right, you become an astronaut. These were outlawed in the mid-70s, but again, split rims were the rule. Steel fenders. And again, the headlight bar seen right here through 1934, 35 standalone pod. So this is definitely a 32.3 or 4. I would say it's a 33 almost certainly, but without the grille, it's hard to say exactly what year this one is. If we look further, The front suspension on this is classic Ford transverse leaf spring. Yes, on a 1-ton truck. You would think something like this might have parallel leaf springs, you know, like a more modern, older vehicle, but the transverse leaf spring, you can see it right here going side to side, transverse, supporting the nose, the live axle, the beam, there it is right there, forging. And same stuff seen in a Model T or a Model A or a Model B, or even up till 1948. All Ford passenger cars had that basic suspension up front, a beam and a transverse leaf spring. Inside, the steel cab is kind of deceptive. The doors are all steel, and they have roll-up windows, but the cab itself still has a little bit of wood content, a little bit of, we can see right here, these bits right here. We're on our way toward a full steel cab by this point in time. Built-in visor over the windshield, kind of cool. It's actually integrally stamped with the roof. Helps to keep the sun out of your eyes, but again, it's not articulated. That said, the windshield is hinged. It actually can pop out like that. A little bit of cooling air inside. The horn button right here in the middle of that steering wheel. Beep, beep. And this thing here is the directionals. Go right, go left. That's the directional signal right there. 3-speed or 4-speed manual transmission. No automatics, of course, in Ford trucks during this point in time. Cool to see things inside of here. The old Valvoline cardboard motor oil containers here. These are from the 60s, almost certainly not from the 1930s, but the old way of doing things with the cardboard. You pop your hands, and one's here is to pour, this one here is for venting. Otherwise, the oil will blip, 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 put a hole here, and it comes out real smooth. Little pro tip for you from the junkyard. Speaking of pros, a fellow named Robert Genet, a legend in automotive journalism, did a great book on the 32 Ford, largely focusing on the Deuce Coupe, and a great book that he wrote. But again, we see right here, the 1932 debut year. Flathead had a 1-barrel carburetor, we see it right there, an aluminum intake manifold. This is a passenger car arrangement, largely the same stuff, 75 horsepower, same basic deal as seen in a truck. But again, 1932 was the year for the 1-barrel. 33, they went to a 2-barrel carburetor. And again, Robert Genet, a well-known journalist. In fact, he did a great book, this one right here, Woodward Avenue. He actually grew up on Woodward Avenue. And Robert is a photographer and just did a great book on the history of Woodward, Jimmy Addison's Silver Bullet. And Robert, before this, was actually an employee at Ford. And crazy but true, he gave me this. This is his ruler from when he worked at Ford Motor Company, Advanced Vehicles Development, I think in the early 60s. And they gave you a ruler with your name on it. Robert, why did you give this to me? I treasure it. I thank you. If this thing could talk, it might have been involved in penning the Mustang, the Falcon, the Cougar, who knows? But again, Robert Genet gave me his ruler. Thank you, Robert. But we move on, and at the back of this truck, this one is again an Express. It once had a flatbed on it, 1-ton frame, much heavier stuff than you'd find on a 32 Ford passenger car, obviously. Massive rear axle. This is the split case torque tube, about 3 times the size of a passenger car rear axle. And something new for the BB series Ford trucks was semi-elliptic leaf springs, or elliptic. In other words, half of an ellipse. We have the back of the spring here, goes all the way to the front. Put two together, it's an ellipse. Before the BB on the AA and the TT Ford trucks, it was quarter elliptic, which means the spring was anchored at the front and ended at the axle and was like that. But the fully elliptic or semi-elliptic springs we see here, new for BB family trucks, gave you better load capabilities and stabilized the axle even better. And here's the rear drum, kind of looks like a modern dually, same basic structure. The brakes inside, here's those yummy asbestos brake shoes right here, riveted in place. Here's the replacement items right there. And asbestos can be problematic if you flake it and happen to inhale it. Otherwise, it's rather inert, but it's good to keep that stuff wet if you're doing destruction or demolition. But again, getting back to that, the asbestos brakes inside of this, full floating axles. You can see right here, here's the lug nuts to hold the wheels on. Meanwhile, these bolts right here, these nuts, take those off. The axle slides out from the inside. It's full floating, which means the axle can come out, but the hub stays on the truck. You can actually pull the truck around and the drums won't come off. It just doesn't have a driven axle if you pull these full floating axle shafts out of the truck. So this one here, who knows what purpose it served. It once had a wooden bed on it with some stakes, perhaps hay bales, perhaps kegs of booze in the Prohibition. Who can say? But again, the Ford Mighty F-Series pickup truck didn't even exist. This is not an F-Series, this is a BB series, which is the B truck, 1-tonner. And a little later on, Ford in the 1950s would get into the Super Duty era with massive trucks, Lincoln V8 power plants, early 50s. But again, this is Ford's humble beginnings on doing something larger than a Model T based truck. The headlights here are electric. Here's the reflector, which was once, I think, probably, maybe nickel plated, something like that. But here's the parking light / turn signal. Here's the main light. This will live right in here with a glass lens over it. And again, Model T transitioned from acetylene lights to electric. Of course, by the time you get into the AA, the Model A period, always electric. Of course, BB's always electric lights. 6 volts, not that bright at night, but then again, max speed on this thing with a load, maybe 40 miles an hour. And again, there was no interstate highways. This thing would have been trucking along literally back roads and even undeveloped interstate or intercity roads, if you will, mud, dirt. So top speed wasn't a big deal. Again, that 110 foot-pounds of torque was 25 more than the Flathead 4 that came before this optional V8, 1932 onward. So again, the beginnings of Ford's F-truck dynasty, kind of before the F, right here. Steel cab, Flathead, V8 power for the masses, right here. John Diller liked it. I do too. Now, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the Steve Maggs YouTube channel. Watch our Junkyard Crawl videos every day. Ring the bell, and that will tell you when the next video comes out, which again is tomorrow morning.